Thank you so much for coming. My name is Dan Cheeley. I am the director of the Collegium Institute for Catholic Thought and Culture. I'm also the executive director of the University of Pennsylvania's program for research on religion and urban civil society. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you this evening to the Collegium Institute's Ars Vivendi spring event on the Poetics of Making. And I'm so proud of this program and the director who designed it from scratch. The director of the Magi Project, as you may know, is Jess Sweeney. And so without further ado, I will offer up the podium to her.
Good evening. I'm happy to welcome you, as Dr. Cheeley said, on behalf of Collegium here at Penn. As he said, my name is Jess Sweeney, and I direct the Ars Vivendi Arts Initiative here at Collegium, which essentially aims to create a conversational space, like here tonight, to explore the relationships between beauty, faith, and the arts, probing their importance to human culture and to a life well lived. The initiative seeks to integrate artistic craft and practice with an understanding of aesthetics and an appreciation for the intellectual life behind the creative mind. Before I share some short thoughts to get our conversation going tonight, I'd first like to take a moment to thank all of our co-sponsors for this event who helped us spread the word around campus and around Philly. So thank you to Penn's Departments of Art History, English, and Visual Studies. And from our wider Philadelphia community, we're also thankful to Wellspring, a Mother Artist project. Tonight, we gather for a special conversation titled On the Poetics of Making, Soul Shaping and the Spiritual Wrestle of the Creative Life. As I was preparing for tonight's conversation, I came across a passage that I hadn't thought about in a long time. It comes from a book called My Bright Abyss, Meditation of a Modern Believer by poet Christian Wyman. In this book, he gives readers a lyrical, beautiful, and heartbreaking reflection on his life of belief and unbelief, his life with cancer, and to do so, he intersperses autobiographical vignettes with his own poetry, as well as a tapestry of voices from literary history. Perhaps one of the glories of this book is the way that he weaves together art and life. As we begin this evening, which will in part be a reflection on that very tension and dance, I want to begin with an excerpt from this book. My chosen passage will itself begin with a passage from Rainer Maria Rilke, and then Wyman reflecting on that passage. So I'm going to have the text for Rilke up on the screen there, so just in case that's helpful. So Rilke wrote, "Truly being here is glorious. Even you knew it, you girls who seem to be lost, to go under in the filthiest streets of the city, festering there, or wide open for garbage. For each of you had an hour, or perhaps not even an hour, a barely measurable time between two moments, when you were granted a sense of being. Everything. Your veins flowed with being. But we can so easily forget what our laughing neighbor neither confirms nor envies. We want to display it, to make it visible, though even the most visible happiness can't reveal itself to us until we transform it within." Wyman then reflects the following. "All right," he says, "but what does it mean to transform these moments of intense inward understanding of the world and experience?" He writes, "I think it can only mean that we carry them with us back into the welter of our lives, that we return to them not as refugees from experience, but as devotees of it, that we come to understand our moments or moment, maybe there was only one, will ever be only one, of clear-spirited existence in terms of all the life that is so obviously not, and vice versa. So we'll return very briefly to this passage from Wyman in a moment, but I was in part reminded of this passage recently when I came across a different quote from a novel. I'll read it to you as well. It's very short, the passage. I want to hold them in tension together. So this quote is from Garth Greenwell's 2024 novel, Small Rain. He writes, "Try to remember this, I admonish myself, since I knew it would fade. All happiness fades, or does for me. Misery digs deep gouges in the memory, sets the course of the self, I sometimes think. It lays down the tracks one is condemned to move along, whereas happiness leaves no trace. Remember this, I said to myself. Why should only suffering be a veil of soul-making? Why shouldn't the soul be made of this moment too? This unremarkable moment. Remember this." So I found myself wondering which of these is true, or maybe they're both true. Are they true for each of us at different times and chapters of our lives? And what do we do with these moments? These soul-making moments, as Greenwell calls them, these glorious moments, to use Rilke and Wyman's language. I'd contend that these moments force us to rethink our stance in the world, to reframe our very being in the world. If this grief, but also this glory, is possible, even if we only touch it once, as Wyman says, how does this change the way we see, the way we suffer, the way we wrestle, the way we live? I think at the core of art making, of any kind of creative practice, there is this desire to see differently, to see anew, and to meditate on these very kinds of moments in our lives. Estonian composer Arvo Pärt once said, "I did not want to create art. I wanted to free and distance myself from making artificial art. Rather, I wanted to combine two different issues, namely art and life, art and being." This approach comes from a completely different perspective and has a different starting point. It doesn't need to start from art. And this kind of making, this kind of seeing, being, is open to all, not just artists. But I think artists have the potential to open this up for others, to reveal the dance and the wrestle in consolation and desolation, to let things dig down deep into our memories, our hearts, and our souls. So much of orienting our lives towards a kind of beautiful intentionality, even amidst suffering, amidst confusion, amidst anger, is caught up in the ability to return to wonder, to being willing, to being awoken to the aliveness around us and beyond us. So tonight, I hope that you'll explore these things with us, whether you're an artist yourself or nothing of the sort. So before I introduce our three panelists, I'd like to give you a sense of how things will flow tonight. So I'll briefly introduce each of our speakers, and then after that, I'll hand things off to them, and they'll offer some brief opening remarks to sort of frame our conversation. And then the four of us will kind of have a organic conversation, get to ask questions of each other, and sort of explore what comes out of those remarks at the beginning. But then we'll open it up to questions from you as well. So feel free to jot things down as they pop into your brain, because you'll have time to voice those. So I'm thrilled to introduce you to our three guests this evening. They are three artists working across various mediums, and who I've had the pleasure to get to know over the last few years. So I'll introduce all three, and then they'll each come up and speak to you guys. So Amy Bornman, in the middle here, is a poet, textile artist, and mother living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She is the author of, She is the author of two books of poetry. They're called There Is a Future and Broken Waters, and she's also the co-author of How to Sew Clothes, published by Abrams. Amy also publishes zines, prints, and other ephemera as part of her home-based small press, Imaginary Lake, and designs simple sewing patterns for All Well Workshop, which she founded in 2019. Amy's work in both poetry and textiles focuses on themes of domesticity, self-regard, caregiving, place, and spirituality. And Joshua Stamper is a transdisciplinary artist and composer whose work explores hiddenness, revelation, ephemera, and archive. He has worked as an orchestral arranger, studio conductor, and session musician for Columbia, Sony BMG, and Concord Records, Lionsgate Films, Warner Brothers Pictures, and Legendary Entertainment, and for several independent labels like Domino, Dead Oceans, Important Records, Joyful Noise Recordings, and Mason Jar Music. Joshua's music has been commissioned by the Grammy-winning chamber choir, The Crossing, and includes collaborations with the Daedalus Quartet, Mantra Percussion, and the Philadelphia architecture firm Kieran Timberlake. And then lastly, Lee Ruth Nowell-Wilson is an American figurative artist creating large-scale paintings and works on paper. She newly lives and works in Northeast Pennsylvania. Her work documents the mundane, humorous, overloaded, holy, and tender aspects of daily domestic life. From 2019 to 2023, she was founder, curator, and editor of Milked, an arts publication which brings art that explores the maternal experience to the forefront of contemporary culture. Recently, her work has been exhibited at the Susquehanna Art Museum, IANA at Hillier in Washington, D.C., Lake Forest College, amongst other galleries. So I will hand things off to Amy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I have had a certain poem stuck in my head for years now. The poem is by the late poet Brett Foster, whose work I really only had the opportunity to interact with as his time on Earth was ending and then after. I don't know why in particular this poem has stayed so close to the surface of my brain. Maybe the rhythm pleases me, maybe the form. But the first line rings the most and comes to mind sometimes without warning. Doctrine can never be belief. I'll read the whole poem now and you can read it along. It's up here. One carries it around within. Doctrine can never be belief. Doctrine is one means only to register belief, like a job interview conducted briefly, or census taker who has never seen the tin of steaming tamales, much less taste them. He makes his tallies, door to door without relief. Sometimes doctrine is most felt as a grief, hard in the bones or sorrow's marrow when prodigious cells of clumps become prolific. The other part is like a funny gift, there in your bones as well, but lonelier, late, sent from a shipping station far in the distance, opened but barely known. It still irradiates your every admiration for existence. I've been trying to untangle why this text comes to mind so very often and what it means. It feels almost like it has become a sort of small liturgy in my mind. What does it ask? What does it lift? The title offers me answers. I often forget that this is the title of the poem, thinking only of the first line. One carries it around within. That's the marrow of it, that inner clasping of something vital within. Is it belief? You could infer that that's what Foster's getting at. I think I need reminding of that sometimes, that everything I need is already carried inside of me, the fullness of Christ, belief, which often, for me at least, feels slippery and hard to hold on to with any kind of firm grip. I need reminded. Art is the same way. Sometimes so solid in the palm of one's hand, the confident project, the flow state, making the work become real, the sturdy practice. But so much more often I feel that I carry it around within. Doctrine can never be belief. You could think of doctrine as that which comes from outside the self, and belief as that which comes from within. Both are needed, but one lies much closer to the bone. Belief is the flame of the Christian and the artist both. To believe in the world's holiness, to continue to see it as an ever-widening circle, always more to see. That belief is connected to wonder, and those postures are where art has always begun for me, The doctrine of art making slides into familiar forms, enters a world of references and interconnectedness, of boundaries and codes, perhaps. It springs from that belief, but it needs that forebear. The way the artist is still an artist when they are not making art, that little flame inside. My life and work begs a lot of creativity from me, and I try to fling as much of myself as I can into everything I make. My day job is designing sewing patterns. I make quilts, I make clothes, I also write poems. And sometimes the things I make feel hollow, sometimes they feel rote. That's okay, not everything is a masterpiece. There will always be rabbit holes and things that are made just for the sake of making something. That's part of an artist's practice. But the true art, when it arises, feels like it flows straight from that something that is carried around within. Belief, maybe. That feels like a helpful word for me. Belief as confidence. Belief as truth. Belief as conviction. That inner arm reaching out and being grasped in return. By the world, by beauty, by God. Any true art that I make flows from there. The trouble is that it cannot be manufactured. I can feel the difference in myself. It's a subtle switch. I wish I could understand better that mechanism for accessing that true belief and further, true art. But that's not how it has worked for me. Better to surrender to the mystery, to let the veil stay hanging in the doorframe. Just this month, I've finally begun compiling a new poetry manuscript that has taken over 4 years to write, one poem at a time. So slowly, it felt like it wasn't happening at all. I felt worried that my career as a poet was over. Both of my 2 previous books were written much quicker, both in under a year. Those books felt like a river emboldened by rainfall. But this book trickled so slowly, written just at the pace of life. They are all the poems I've written since my sons were born. There's no speeding up true experience. Time is such a strong doctrine, a boundary we lean against, but one carries it around within, that little wheel turning, that belief, the impulse to continue to see what was in my life as a place ripe for poetry, just slowly. Now that this project is turning the corner from writing the poems to shaping them into a book, I'm thinking a lot about memory. The way each of these poems has captured a tiny, single frame of that ineffable belief, one that otherwise might have been lost or gone unnoticed. Altogether, they form such a clear, moving image of the last 4 years. That I've spent learning how to mother my children. But frame by frame, the story was inscrutable. It took so long. Could I have remembered otherwise? I'm sure I could, but differently. This is a tiny poem from this collection that I'm working on. Benediction. May the memory of this bone-tired time smell of honeysuckle. This is the title poem. I've titled the book Honeysuckle. But this benediction feels washed over these years in stunning hindsight. The way the scent of honeysuckle filled my nose like incense as I was pushing my first son up a hill near our house in his stroller. I felt then this sense of kairos, of deep time. I could feel my future memory pooling in the present fullness. The kind of poem that only springs from true belief and feels instantly eternal. A direct thread between whatever I carry around within, that sprig of God, and the present ordinariness. Belief, like a funny gift, there in the bones. It stays past doctrine's edges and past logic or whatever quick thing you could dash off easily. The slow gathering of true art is mysterious. I feel such relief now to see a book's worth of poems from these years that felt so fruitless. But no hustle could have written this book for me. It had to come so slowly. I had to give up the idea that I could write book after book quickly. Sometimes time just needs to pass, and you just have to trust that the work is still inside you somewhere. Back to the last part of One Carries It Around Within. There in your bones as well, but lonelier, late, sent from a shipping station far in the distance, opened, but barely known, it still irradiates your every admiration for existence. Lonelier, late. Belief has felt lonely for me lately. And art too. Motherhood really steamrolled me and reshuffled everything in my life, including my capacity for contemplation and prayer as I'd known them before, and my capacity for making art in the ways I used to too. I have found myself lonely in a dark night of the soul, my usual patterns meeting dead ends. I'm coming to realize now, and maybe this should have been obvious all along, that my poems are all prayers. Each poem is a question raised, asked in direct address, sometimes bold, sometimes sheepish, a declaration, a request, a confession, an unraveling of that doctrine I may have once seen as a kind of signpost. I think I write each poem as if God may receive it and somehow absorb the tension I feel. Those prayers do not go unanswered. In some ways, the ability to write the poems at all is the blessing, the second grace. To find myself years later with artifacts of where my soul found itself, the memory of honeysuckle, somehow just as potent as the experience of it. As I stood on that roadside with my baby, I will remember that moment forever now. The poem offers a tiny tether to that eternity. One carries it around within. Belief can be buoyant too, can't it? That part of me that would like to float straight to heaven is the same part that keeps writing poems and finding my way toward new ways to see. Belief like energy, belief like play, the child who can trust that she is safe and all is well. I wrote a poem that surprised me the other day in the midst of the disconcerting stock market crash and everything I've relied on feeling suddenly so uncertain and precarious. It's called Small Art, and it's not my greatest poem, but it captures this feeling that I've been holding recently. Small art. That smallness is the beautiful thing to me. That small art inside of us that never goes away, that bubbles up. That impulse, that buoyant lift, the nudge toward pinning the moment to the wall, choosing an image to immortalize, the incarnation of time itself giving breath and bones to a memory that otherwise might be lost. Holy idea, belief. It never goes away. We're born with it beating inside of us. I'll read the poem now. Small art. Small art to grace the heart. When I see it, I feel. Small art to part the air and open tiny doors within the mind. Small art that rings every bell, reminds you of your own small start, little metronome inside. Small art that is so big in the one who makes it. I stand in awe. We are still alive. The stock market tumbles down and small art hovers just above the ground. The memory of an old neighbor's music, listening to him sing. They can never touch us, really. They can never take our lives. One carries it around within, our small art, our hearts and minds, our belief, which is quiet and light and steady. Any attempt to give others a glimpse of what we hold inside of ourselves is a pure offering. I think art and belief both are not delicate inside of us. They can withstand life's piling on of complicated layers. They can cut through the air like the scent of honeysuckle or incense, instantly transportative to a place where you remembered everything. Like in Foster's poem, art is one of our greatest tools to enflesh and experience belief, to irradiate our every admiration for existence. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Joshua Stamper. I forgot to time these remarks, so buckle up. Or if things get really bad, you can just call security, I guess. So I really like the name of this event, the Poetics of Making, with poetics being defined as the creative principles that govern the construction of a thing, whether that's the construction of a thing in the realm of sciences, the sciences, or in the humanities, in politics, or in the arts. It's about the theory of form, about how things come into being. A related word is poiesis, which is about the process of emergence. It's derived from the ancient Greek, which means to make. So unsurprisingly, poiesis and poetics share etymologies. Martin Heidegger describes poiesis as a bringing forth, a bloom, a blossoming of a thing. So it's the wave that crests, or it's the egg that hatches, or like right now, it's all of these buds exploding in early spring. So in particular, though, he describes these threshold moments. So it's not just about a thing that comes into being that wasn't there before. It's about something that becomes something different than what it was before. Where poiesis is about the unfolding of a thing out of itself. So you might imagine I was going to say a caterpillar that emerges from a cocoon, but that would be backwards. The butterfly that emerges from the cocoon, or the flower blossoming, and that there's something fundamentally different that's happening. So the poetics of making, what we're calling our time tonight, you could also reframe as the making of making. So in other words, what are the processes and the conditions by which making can actually happen? It seems like, particularly in this moment of profound unmaking, aforementioned stock market crash, this feels like a really important question to engage. And it's a question that I think about constantly. So the biggest design problem is your life. This was the advice that was given by the architect Louis Kahn to a close collaborator of his. And it represents that question represented this kind of crystalline juncture in this man's life, one of these threshold moments that we were just talking about. And I think it's true for us as well. How do we build anything inside of impossibly dynamic environments? We balance career, we balance child raising, we are dealing with errands and emails and groceries and showering and exercising, preferably showering after exercising, occasionally sleeping. So that's just the external stuff. Never mind the internal, the sort of the dynamism and even the chaos of our interior lives, the emotional weather of grief or loss or ecstasy or distraction or boredom. These are all, both the exterior and the internal, they represent a measure of instability, sometimes small, sometimes quite large. And so what does it mean to make inside of that kind of an environment? Is it possible? So there's that big question, but not just that question. there's the bigger question of how can we build, whatever we build, how can we build according to a logic of abundance as opposed to a logic of scarcity, where we come face to face with the givenness of things. How do we build this way as contingent creatures living in a contingent world? So Louis Kahn, as I mentioned before, was sort of regarded as this mystic architect. His lectures they read more like a book of Proverbs than they do a treatise on architecture. He imagines the following. You say to brick, "What do you want, brick?" And brick says to you, "I like an arch." If you say to brick, "Arches are expensive, and I can use a concrete lintel over an opening. What do you think of that, brick?" And brick says, "I like an arch." The painter and printmaker Robert Motherwell describes a similar phenomenon. He says, "A creative person directs his love toward the other thing in human existence as rich, sensitive, supple, and complicated as human beings themselves. That is to say, towards an artistic medium which is not an inert object, or conversely a set of rules for composition, but a living collaboration, which not only reflects every nuance of one's being, but which, in the moment in which one is lost, comes to one's aid, not arbitrarily or capriciously, but seriously, accurately, and concretely with you, as when a canvas says to one, 'This empty space in me needs to be pinker,' or a shape says, 'I want to be larger and more expansive,' or the format says, 'The conception is too large or too small for me. It's all out of scale.' Or a stripe says, 'Gouge me more, you are too polite and elegant.' Or a gray says, 'A bit more blue. My present color is uncomfortable and does not fit.'" So we see here a conversation between the artist and their material. We see a free artist meeting the free world. And what emerges in the interaction between those two free entities is art. And that conversation happens through material, through stuff, through the tactility of a thing. The conversation is at points convivial, it's at points heated, it's always intimate. The deliberation between a painter and the canvas, a dancer's foot and the floor, a composer and the scribbles of notes on a page, is the negotiation of agendas. Artist and material, clay, notes, wood, words, paint, they all have their list of demands and points where they're willing to bargain. Ultimately, though, material and artist, they help one another, they encourage one another. Art making, essentially, viewed from this vantage point, is a friendship. So through this, we see a material world that is suffuse with the sublime, where light and language and wood and wave, all of these things are incandescent with mystery. Hiddenness and revelation enfold one another. That's material. Let's talk about time. So my father-in-law is probably the individual that is the most unlike me. But there was one moment early on. It was shortly after our first born was born. It was just in the weeks just afterwards, and as many of you who might be young parents, sleep is a bygone memory. And any sort of time to do my own work had completely evaporated. And so consequently, I was just feeling a sort of bone level fatigue and just general irritability. And there was a point where he asked how I was doing, also surprising. So I was sort of sharing some of this with him, and he said, there are seasons. If you knew Alan Bainey, you would be equally dumbfounded. But I think that there's something really, really key here. I was so glad to hear you mention deep time, because this juxtaposition of stability and modulation, where the relationship between the physical and the immaterial, this suggests the wisdom of a wider temporal scale, the one that measures time in eons rather than decades or centuries or even millennia. So theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli, who I had this amazing experience of having breakfast with Carlo Rovelli in Italy a couple years ago, which is not expected. We talked about everything from Sun Ra to white holes. So anyway, but from his perspective of deep time, from the perspective of deep time, things like a stone become happenings, like a kiss. He says, we live 100 years, but suppose we lived 1 billion years. A stone would just be a moment in which some sand gets together and then disaggregates. So it's just a momentary getting together of sand. So a whole mountain, from the vantage point of deep time, moves like waves. You might imagine a tree that you walk past being like a flash freeze, or a flash frame, freeze frame, that's what I was looking for, explosion or fireworks. Chemical physicist Ilya Prigogine concurs. He advocates for a physics of becoming as opposed to a physics of being. He says the science of objects gives way to the science of events. And Goethe concurs, music is liquid architecture. Architecture is frozen music. So through this discussion of time and then material, what we're describing is the fundamental ingredients of environments and trying to widen our understanding of what our own environments might be, the way that they might be conceptualized to make a more accommodating framework in which we might work. So at this point, I'd love to share with you a project that is still in progress. It's a project that I started 2019, but it's very slow, very involved work. But it is about the idea of trying to create a musical environment in which there is malleability, where there's emergence. Now, there are musical frameworks like improvisation where that happens all of the time. But in this particular project, I'm working with fixed elements, but trying to explore ways in which those things become pliable, and new things might happen. And of course, all of this is, like all art, it is in some way a metaphor for our lives. So what this is doing is it's trying to build inside of these dynamic, dissipative structures, a context where new relationships are emerging, even as other relationships are breaking apart. So there are a few slides that I would love to show you, and then actually just play for you one iteration of this project. So the project is called A Thing That Can Ignite Can Go. It's based on a line from an Emily Dickinson poem. And so what this is again, a musical environment. So I'm just gonna go up here because it'll be easier this way. So what this is you have, in this particular, this was a proof of concept that I wrote of this idea. So what you have is essentially layers of score that are all stacked on top of each other. And you have, so it's a piece that's written for 10 musicians, a string quartet and a percussion sextet. Everybody's reading their music off of tablets, which is the way most musicians these days are engaging with their material. But on each page of each player's part, there are these collections of hyperlinks. As they're reading along, let's say the cellist gets to measure 12 and he sees 3 hyperlinks. And whatever the cellist chooses, that will shoot them to a different part of the score. Okay, and so this is sort of a sort of overview map of what's going on. Now this doesn't show you what the music is, but each of these kind of wide space columns, these are each a layer of score that's stacked on top of itself. And all of these little dots and lines, these are the hyperlinks that connect one layer to another. And then these little horizontal lines, which are a little hard to see in this room, are the actual instruments. So what you have, maybe move to the next slide. So this is just a much smaller, condensed version of it. So another model of what's going on. So this is just a picture of what's happening with the string quartet. Incidentally, this piece was also based on a lecture by Louis Kahn. So this is another way of looking at it, where you have the, each player in the string quartet is, it's arranged in 3 dimensions. Each line is a score layer, and you see all of the sort of potential points of movement inside of each distinct player. But you also get some kind of a sense of the sort of dynamism of the interaction that's happening between all of them. Why don't we go to the next one? So this is very, very zoomed out. If we were to print this out, it would be about 14 feet long. So this is just the violin part for all of the first violin part for all of these. So this is an example of kind of what's going on that you can see. So it starts off on the 5th score layer and gets here and moves up, and so you get this sense of its ability to sort of move around. This is one of many, many, many different possible routes that it might take. But that's happening with all of the musicians, and they're all making different decisions about where they're going at any given point. And so what you have is you have this whole collection of this whole field of possibilities about what music might be there. And so each of these score layers are the same length. It's about a 4-minute long piece. But contained within that is close to 30 minutes worth of music. So anytime this piece is played, it's one iteration. The next time it will be something completely different because everybody's making different decisions about where they're going. So all of that other music, it will have to wait until next time, or maybe the time after that, or maybe never. It's all there, sort of like when you take a walk in the woods. You can take one path, or you can take another path, or you can leave the path altogether. But there's no way to explore all of it at the same time. So that's the general conceit. So if we can go ahead and play it. So this, what we're going to listen to, you'll see sort of a kind of an opening demonstration of the basically what I just described, and then you'll see and hear all these musicians moving around. So go ahead. So this is going to give you a little bit of a taste of what each of these score layers sounds like. this is showing you, this is one musician gets to a link juncture, then there's choices, and then it takes that. So that's that. So clearly in my remarks, I was operating on deep time and not on regular time. There's more that to share, but I need to wrap up. So I'm going to just move to the very last thing, which is just noting that wherever you are, whether or not you are in an ideal environment of a fancy residency in France, or whether you are immersed in the chaos of all of it, that the thing that is critical is to make a mark. Whatever the canvas is that you're working with, make a mark. That when you make a mark, that mark is a question that opens up fields of inquiry. It closes other fields of inquiry, but it's a mark. It's a problem to respond to. And that mark making can happen really, really, really fast. And what emerges from that, or it can take years and years to emerge with another new book of poetry. But make the mark. And in that mark making, not only will you emerge with new work, but you will emerge with a new understanding of the environment that you are working within. And also, every mark you make also marks you, that we are made by what we make. We're formed by what we form. So I'll leave it there, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you again, Jess, for this opportunity to speak on such a brilliant topic. It is insanely intimidating to go after these brilliant minds. I am very thankful to be alongside such admirable company. My name is Lee Ruth, Lee Nowell-Wilson, artistically before this. I wanted to share some of my own musings, or some musings on my own artistic process, laid out autobiographically and interwoven with hopefully poetic reflections on what inspires me about this brilliant topic of the poetics of making. I want to begin with a paragraph from a recent article I read, written by Father Silouan Justiniano in 2013 for the Orthodox Arts Journal. He wrote a 6-part series titled Degraded Iconicity, and for part 3, he began with writing about aspects of the icon as symbol and mysteriological object. He writes, St. Theodore reminds us that though not becoming mixed or one in nature, the prototype and the image have their being, as it were, in each other. The icon is not merely a sign that points to the idea of Christ. Rather, it is, as a mysteriological reality, a symbol linked to him. A true manifestation, or ekphansis, out-appearing of the prototype. Through material depiction, we encounter the true presence of Christ. Since in the incarnate person of the Logos, there is a union without division or confusion of divinity and humanity. In venerating his material icon, we paradoxically kiss and handle divinity. As St. John of Damascus says, God's body is God because it is joined to his person by a union which shall never pass away. The divine nature remains the same. The flesh created in time is quickened by a reason-endowed soul. Because of this, I salute all remaining matter with reverence, because God has filled it with his grace and his power. He continued with one line I love particularly, which is, the icon is a border between the created and the uncreated. Now, although I pray I receive the honor and blessing one day to write icons, my current paintings are nowhere near iconography. However, it is the great example from my artistic mind, and in the same manner that Father Silouan described icons as a border between the created and uncreated, so has my art process been a bridge of connection to my Creator, a wrestle of prayer. Father Silouan goes on in this article to articulate how a veil moving and unfurling in the wind is what reveals the unseen. If you take that veil of matter and creation away, our perception of the divine is lost. So through the incarnation, matter becomes grace-bearing in the life of the Church. I find an incredible amount of hope in this fact as an artist, that although it all be dust and shall not remain in the end, there is an interaction between matter and the divine. There is a holiness to be found in the mundane, a profundity in the monotony, and an importance in my offering of art making. Now, how does any of this relate to soul shaping, or the poetics of making, or my own art, a measly little person now living in Northeast Pennsylvania? For me, the answer lies within the why. Why am I painting? Why does material connect so deeply to my soul? Why do I have the instinct to play and manipulate shape, color, and form? Is paint just a material? Is it about the material? Sometimes yes, always no, and occasionally it's a both and. If I could have the, oh great, awesome. Thank you for that first slide. I guess jump to the next one, please. About the yes. For many years, my drawings have specifically used materials that paradoxically mirrored my maternal emotions. The scratchy and velvety quality of charcoal perfectly encompassing the aggressive, tender, heavy, humorous quality of fresh motherhood. Intricately drawn toy cars. This piece is absolutely humongous. This is just a little detail. Intricately drawn toy cars, amongst many other domestic objects, appeared in my drawings and brought with them a resounding, loud cacophony of silence. Because it's my ears that hear the clanging, pounding, banging in my brain as I remember my child crashing those toy cars onto the floor and my impatience smothering itself under each wooden wheel. But you can't hear my impatience. You see the rendered light and shadow, intricately rendered with the softness of charcoal, falling on the disarrayed mound, and somehow there's beauty in the mess. That classic line rings true. There's beauty in the mess. Go to the next slide, please. That leads to the no. I'm already moving quickly away from talking about materials alone. Those days of ragged new motherhood have shifted to slower days of letter practicing and pretend picnics, couch reads and hourly prayers, monastic bells and church services as we just moved to seminary for my husband to pursue the Orthodox priesthood. Our patterned rugs continue to catch my patterned thoughts as I spend afternoons homeschooling our 4 children, and currently the brush stands still. The paint sits untouched. Time feels slow, and the house feels secure, and myself as a mother feels just ever so slightly more seasoned and less frantic. To quote a statement said by Guy Cogvel about Vuillard's life, my creative life is entirely lacking in flamboyance. And on one hand, it feels utterly freeing. No flashy parades of heroism with the obligatory series of scandalous challenges to convention. Again, to quote Mr. Cogwell. I guess to the next slide, please. Thank you. But as I have felt the permission to slow down with painting, to actively enter a desert season, so to speak, I have naturally recognized that I am only human, and I hold a restlessness in my bones, a tendency to resent the mundane. I simplified my life, but now as I sweep repetitively, or go over phonics repetitively, or pour fake tea repetitively, or eat fake biscuits repetitively, I begin to question this humdrum aspect of familial rhythm, the monotony of mothering. As I build towers for little hands to knock down over and over, each game exposes a metaphor of dissatisfaction in my heart and complete impatience. But that inner moaning led me to question, why am I honestly so restless? Why can't I sit here in a satisfied, content, present manner? And to answer the question quickly, I will say it is my restless will. My stubborn resistance to being told what to do even by my 4-year-old, or my 8-year-old, or my 3-year-old. Whoop, skipped the ages. 8, 6, 4, and 15 months. My unreconciled heart expecting fulfillment from the wrong metaphorical laundry basket. And as I start to wrestle with that why, not the why of why I paint, I recognize my connection to the story of Jacob and the angel. I start to vaguely understand an idea I heard of from Tito Colliander in his book Way of the Ascetics about the communication of the divine through material things. Commonplace things contribute towards our spiritual sustenance when operating under an exchange system with God. That was his idea. God offers us something, we offer it back, so on and so forth. But one can only wish that life was that linear and simple. Usually we refuse to let go. He teaches us how, and the exchange happens in a fumbling, tumbling kind of wrestle. You can go to the next slide, please. As I've already alluded, the canvas is my wrestling mat, Oh, sorry, next slide after that. Thank you. Oh yeah, there we go. So as I've already alluded, the canvas is my wrestling mat. That's why it's a both and. The materials are the veil that reveals the true conversation. As I'm painting, I am also thinking, gosh, our world moves wicked fast and I have misplaced expectations. When I move so fast, I lose sight of the unreconciled conflict within my heart, and weeds grow before I even knew that they were planted. When I sweep over the substance of my day, I mistake it as debris rather than material. When I sweep over the material of my day, I discard the growth, the sanctification, the inspiration, and even the prayers. And when I sweep over the rhythm of prayers, I fill that space up with debris, actual debris. So between sitting on the floor or under a table, zooming around tiny cars, or building with tiny Legos, hearing 10 times a day, "Mommy, take a picture of my drawing," or losing my good posture due to buckling over to help dress and undress, what material is there that I'm mistaking as debris? Remember, the incarnate Christ has filled material, matter, with divinity. Ultimately, reconciliation within any season is gained through the sacrifice of novelty. And that is ultimately why I paint. It is ultimately why I paint and draw what I paint and draw, which is simple domestic scenes. To wrestle with that sacrifice, to allow the grace of God to enter a foolish soul such as mine, and to see, even if just a glimpse, a clarity of truth. Thank you.
We'll have time for questions from you guys as well. But we'll have a little bit of time here for the four of us to kind of converse. So I guess I'm wondering, one, do any of you have any like burning questions you want to put down before I start with the questions? Maybe try yeah, I'm wondering, so this is kind of coming from all three of you, so hopefully you can sort of all speak to it. But sort of, I guess, how, when you first started making, maybe how you found your medium and how you found yourself sort of becoming more intimate with that medium, but then also how you navigate maybe like sort of what Lee was alluding to, sort of these sort of dry spells. So I don't know, I guess I'm just sort of curious to talk a little bit about how you find like the material bringing you back. This question is not formed properly, but anyways, I don't know if that resonates at all. So just sort of the way in which that first spark maybe of that friendship that Josh talked about, how that carries you, and how you see that connecting you, because it seems like there's this connection between the material and the divine, and just in general, right, in the world, but then also like particularly incarnated in artistic practice, there's a sense of the material, right, that you're sort of working with, and the ways in which that kind of touches your soul. Amy and Lee both sort of kind of talked a bit about that. So I'm just curious how that sort of carries you through your practice, through various stages.
For me, I didn't write poems until just a couple of years ago, but I know exactly where poetry originated for me, which is the poet whose poem I referenced. His name's Brett Foster. He was a professor at Wheaton College for years and years, which that's where I went to school. And he died of cancer when I was a senior, or just after I'd graduated. And I was in the theater department, and he was a great friend to the theater. So I was a part of this theater project in his last days where he was furiously writing a manuscript of poems about cancer as he was dying. And we were kind of being given these poems one by one to create this theater project that we were going to like do for him or with him, because he was close friends with the director of the theater, and so we were just sort of making something out of these poems. And I sort of witnessed this person who was dying, very actively dying, but writing just this like proliferation of poetry. He was writing like multiple poems a day that were all incredible. And we were at the same time like memorizing these poems and turning them into this theater piece. And we had the truly like heaven touching experience of we were all in a room together. We were performing this piece as he died. And so all of the people that loved this man were together in a room. And we saw his priest stand up and leave as we were performing this theater piece. And we all knew what was happening because his priest and his family left to go be with him. And we all stayed together and completed this theater piece. It's one of those things where you're like, how am I a part of this? Like, how am I? And I'm still clearly like, I don't understand that experience. So I was like 22 and I did that. And then I walked away, and then that truly, like, it was like a seed being planted in my soul, where I saw the way that poetry somehow was able to contain like the fullness of this person's spirit, this thing that he had made we were using poetry from his whole life, basically. The way that it was such a like complete celebration of his self, and in that way, just a celebration of life itself. It was so whole, and so, again, just like this like heaven crashing to earth moment. And so I think that's why I was like, I guess poems are a pretty good medium. I'll try this out. Couldn't really ignore that experience. And it connected for me because I loved the way that you said that the material and the maker, it's a friendship where, if you're at odds with your material, which of course is sometimes going to be tension, but there has to be this friendship. It has to be like a connection or a chemistry has to be there. So once I found that, I was like, I think that this medium can hold some of my life too, and hopefully be able to bring that spirit of like wholeness over time in even a small way.
I will jump in and say that I am not friends with my materials at all. We are rivals, utter rivals. I see it in my 6-year-old. He adores to draw as well. I can see he's got like a lot of the same type of like, I've got to figure you out kind of like urge to draw. And I think that that's what the spark is that it is this innate curiosity to figure it out. That doesn't go away in spite of the frustration, in spite of the fact that you can't figure it out. Like, why is brick gotta be an arch? Like, why? And brick's just like standing there saying like, I'm gonna be an arch. And you're just, I can't walk away from just being like, but why? And how can I like maybe make you into like the platform under the arch, And so for the material has always hosted those conversations for me too. And when our first was born in 2017, I, for just a very practical reason, put oil painting to the side because I wasn't sure how to balance, the toxic materials alongside a newborn, and dove into charcoal because I had always loved drawing as well. And then outburst this whole new conversation of like a different tactileness. Like it was like, here's this different texture that I like can attack the paper with. And I have all of these emotions, and this material is like engaging in such a direct conversation with those paradoxical feelings. Like, it's scratchy and velvety. And that's how motherhood is. Like, you give birth and then that's crazy. And then your skin is super soft. How is your skin super soft? That's weird. And so attacking the paper felt very cathartic and just, wrestling that, like I mentioned. And then when that season of like calmness comes, paint you can't attack in the same way. It's just a completely different conversation and a completely different series of whys and questions. And so as our third was born and that settled character kind of started entering my heart, it was like the urge to attack was kind of going away. And I simultaneously had the urge to come back to oil painting. And it was wonderful because we had just bought a house and we had a backyard for the first time, and our third child was born in the summer. So it was just like the dog days of summer, and here I am like gooping on slow paint. Like, it was just like so hilarious to me that the material matched so perfectly without even me truly seeking it, matched so perfectly the season. And so then it does again beg the conversation of like material being a person and really kind of coming to you, which sounds so bizarre, but I do think that since, I believe that there is a God who's knocking on my shoulder, I can't help but also believe that he's kind of like, look, you got a lot of anxiety, just like, here's this material to like go and get all of this out now. And yep, new season, and I'm just gonna kind of give you this idea because I know you better than yourself, and I know that you need this wrestling mat. So charcoal's not doing it for you anymore. Like, charcoal's done, and in comes oil paint again. And then as I also started feeling like entering a desert season, I got a weird urge to paint a bunch of grass. Like, what does that mean? It's just, so it's kind of this outside of yourself and inside of yourself kind of spark, I think, that then again just continues the curiosity. Like, I played music, I played the piano, and I did theater a little bit. I was part of the, backstage. I was not the actress on the front, but more in the back. But still, like, you do all the different things in high school, but whatever holds that particular curiosity and frustration. Like, I almost smile when my son gets so frustrated because I'm just like, it is the spark of a beautiful rivalry. It's not even a friendship. But anyways, yeah.
Well, friends sometimes joke, sometimes hang out peaceably, often argue. So, I think for me, in terms of my attraction to music, music is sort of my principal discipline, but I'm often working transdisciplinarily, where I'm working in dialogue with film or with dance or architecture, any given discipline that there might be the opportunity to work with. But I think it is, when you're talking about that kind of there is a sort of fundamental tension or a question that I first experienced in music. So that a good example of this is in Western music, there's an equal division of 12, an equal division of an octave. So like C and then the C above that, it's divided into 12 different equal parts. This is again in Western music. And other music from other places in the world, the octave can be separated into different combinations. Anyway, so the smallest distance that you can get from one note to the next in Western music is what's called a minor second. So if you go to a piano, it's two piano keys right next to each other. And the first time I heard that, I was in some, it was probably some like summer theater camp or something, and there was a song that was being sung, and these two kind of lines, they were intertwining, and the singers hit a minor second, and it was like the space-time continuum opened up, and I was like, what was that? And it was similar to what you're describing. It was so, I had no category for what I heard, but I wanted more of it. And I think this also presses on the point of how we understand dissonance, not just in music, but in life. And I'm very much of a very, very firm conviction that dissonance and discord are not synonymous terms. Sometimes there's overlap between the two, but when we think of discord as being all the clash, all the jar, all the sort of conflict, all the angst, but dissonance, sometimes it includes those things, but fundamentally dissonance is motion. That's the thing that makes something move. So you imagine the music of somebody like Bach or Mozart or Beethoven, or all the sort of music that to our ears sounds like it makes the most sense. It's just well, of course that's what it's doing. But the thing that all of those composers, even something that seems so kind of placid and sort of can do no harm, somebody like, I don't know, Haydn or something like that, those people were all masters of dissonance, because their music is always moving. There's always these little kind of points of tension that keep you listening to the next thing. And so in terms of like what friendship might look like, or what, how we understand what's happening with our material, I think that some kind of nugget of dissonance or of tension is absolutely core to making the thing do what it needs to do. So, and again, the place that I experienced that first super profoundly was with music. So
we wanted to open it up to you guys. So if anyone has a question for one of the panelists, I guess we could bring a mic to you, or you can just sort of project as well. Does anyone have any questions?
Hello, I'm Jason. I graduated UPenn last year. Something that I noticed, I think all three of you brought up at the beginning of your remarks, was the idea of being. And speaking personally, the theological concept I've struggled with is understanding how being and goodness are related, or maybe identical, some theologians would say. And I'm curious whether in being artists and making art, well, first of all, have you been able to understand the relationship between goodness and being better? Have you seen goodness in a more direct way through your work? And then more broadly, do you think that art, as opposed to dialectic, is really the only way that you can explore an issue like that in an effective way?
I think that first, I would say, to your first point of the connection of being and goodness, is simply because when God created, he said it was good, period. And when God created everything, he ended then with saying it is good, period. There's nothing outside of that. So when he made Adam and Eve, and he made them incomplete, and he made them for growth, and then they grabbed a wisdom before their time and stepped outside of, stepped outside of a timeline maybe that God had for them. That brought in something that was not original. So I think that ultimately, like, we are good as creation, as humans, that first layer is good. But there's a lot of layers after that. There is so many layers after that. But that very first key identity one, as a son, as a daughter, as a human, it is good. So that is where I think, since we do not truly exist without God, there is no being. There is being and goodness innately go hand in hand, is what I think. I'm not quoting any theologian. I am not. Yes, that's my wrestling. That's what I've thought about a lot, and what I've come to. And I'm definitely willing to admit that maybe I didn't articulate it the best way. In regards to art, I don't know, maybe you guys can speak to that one, because I don't know if art does it any better than anything else. I think that if art is your thing to use to process that, then that's the best way to figure it, that's the best tool to figure it out. But if it's not, then it's not. Art in and of itself is nothing. It's nothing more than sports. It's nothing more than what God put in somebody else's heart to as the vessel to process existential questions, so maybe you two guys could speak to the second half of the question.
Yeah, I think the thing that came to mind for me is that being can only be accessed in us through experience and through sort of this ongoing condition of experiencing the world. We can't access pure being. We can't access all of that life, all of that isness all at once. And so all we have is our own experience of our singular self. And I think for me, art has become a good way to translate that experience that I often don't know what to do with. It's overwhelming to experience life. I think being is a heavy thing to carry. It's, the last line of the poem, your every admiration for existence. It's hard to admire your existence all of the time. You can only just live. And so if art is in you as that way to translate that massive experience, the deluge of just life happening in your own body, every person is experiencing all of this for the first time. And for all of us, it's completely novel. It's a new thing. No matter how many times someone else is like, this is what art is for me, I'm experiencing it in myself for the first time, all by myself. I'm alone in here, and then we're in community with each other. And I think what amazes me is how often that impulse comes back to goodness. Almost always, even if I start the poem with some sticky thing that I'm upset about or scared of or afraid, almost always the poem arcs back to some kind of wonder or some kind of good, just a good thing. And it's almost annoying because it's why, no, I was mad. I'm scared. I'm frustrated. But it always comes back to I'm still alive. Look at the tree, whatever. Poems, do all sorts of things like that. But that's what surprises me is I can't get away from that. I can't get away from the good, even if I'm trying to just look at the bad. And that's where, in my experience, that's where it connects there for me.
It's a good question. It's a really challenging. It's like all good questions in that it's a big, it's wide. There's lots to explore. I think that for me there is something about the sort of the conversation that art making is, that is, it feels so much like prayer to me, and just like the conversations that we've been referencing this whole time, that, you know, sometimes those conversations are very convivial, sometimes they're very they become heated arguments. That too is characteristic of prayer. Whether the poem turns out, you know, ends on a happy note, or whether it is this sort of articulation of unbridled rage, there is that is all contained within this a category of being and goodness that accommodates all of those things. So that's I think a really, for me, a really important point, is that the category of what those of both of those things is quite large. So
I just want to say thank you so much to Lee, Ruth, and to Amy and Josh for just diving into what is a big topic, but also making it so concrete, both for, you know, those of you who are artists and those of you who are not, to kind of explore how these things connect to our own lives just on a daily basis, through, you know, dryness, through frustration, through, you know, encounters with beauty. So I'm really thankful for all of you, and thank you for you all for being here. So thank you so much.